everyone. Welcome to the Night's Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, and tonight is Friday night special stream. I see that a couple people have hopped in and are going to be hopping out because they're not used to this being a normal time. In fact, Booth be going off to run a game. Isaiah's off to run a game. And you know what? That is normally where I would be as well. Friday night, 7 p.m. is usually when we do our Friday night D&D game, Pathfinder game, Legend of the Five Rings game, you name it. However, Aaron's kids and wife are sick. So that's where we play. We play at Aaron's house. And so kind of around 4 or 5 o'clock, I learned that we would not be playing. So maybe a little earlier than that. Anyways, it's also a winter storm warning out there for me here in Northeast Ohio. We got about 6 inches of snow, maybe another couple inches to come, but I think like the worst of it's behind us. Either way, I didn't really feel like driving. A lot of times on Fridays, if we're not playing role-playing games, I'll go out to my local gaming store. I'll play a Magic Draft or something like that, but not tonight. Tonight I was just hanging out, chilling at home. So since I was chilling at home, I decided, you know what? Let's bring in the crew. Let's bring in the soothing, smooth vibes of just a really casual, laid-back stream that's a little bit different. So real quick, if you didn't pay attention, this is not going to be about role-playing games. This is about woodworking. And so there's some context for that, of course, because we are a role-playing game channel. But of course, Night's Last Call is more than just a YouTube channel. It's also a community. It's a community of incredible people who have supported us in an amazing capacity, especially over the last couple of years when we were, we were just nobodies. And so we had people come out and really, really support us. And we've had people support us as patrons for many, many, many years. So this year, or I should say, 2024. In 2023, we did a contest, a giveaway, whereby we gave everybody in the Patreon raffle tickets to potentially win the grand prize. And you got a number of raffle tickets depending on how long you'd been a member of the Patreon and what tier level you were. So, if somebody was a $25 a month member, they got more raffle tickets than somebody who was a $3 member. But a $3 member was totally into the drawing. And so we had this big thing. We spun the wheel. We had a cool little wheel that Bob put together, literally had everybody's name on it, weighted appropriately. Tick, 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 tick. It goes around, and it lands on someone who I couldn't have been happier for it to have landed on until I found out where he lived. And that was our good friend Laughing Outlaw, who I see is in chat. So Laughing Outlaw won the grand prize. And what is the grand prize? Well, we'll get into a little bit of the history of this, but I am a pseudo amateur woodworker. And as a result, I have built several gaming tables. And we'll talk about what is a gaming table if you don't know what a gaming table is. And so I said, you know what? The grand prize is going to be, we are going to build a gaming table for somebody. We're going to build a custom gaming table, and we're going to build it in the kind of high quality, traditional methods that I use in my furniture making. And me and the Knights are going to deliver it to you and hopefully maybe play some games with you. So Laughing Outlaw won, which is awesome. But Laughing Outlaw lives in San Diego, which is literally about as far as you can get from Cleveland, Ohio, and still be inside the continental United States, Alaska, I guess. Which is fine, which is great. So then it became this big thing of we're gonna have to do a massive road trip. How are we gonna get the table to San Diego? Are we gonna have to drive it? Are we gonna have to freight ship it? Right? There's a lot of logistical issues. But first, we have to build the table. And so, I spoke with Laughing Outlaw, and I listened to some of his needs and concerns and some of this. And so we kind of went back and forth for a while on design. And we were going to design it and build it last year. However, 2023 was pretty crazy. Bob and Aaron both had a lot of family stuff going on, some personal health issues as well. And as a result, especially Bob, who's really going to help me build this thing, it was just never really a good time for us to get together and build it. I myself was caught up in a home remodel project of my bathroom, which took months instead of weeks. And so, I got really delayed. But this is a big deal for us, and we really want to do this, not just for Laughing Out Loud, because he deserves this table, but just because it's something that we're really excited about doing, and we think it'd be really fun to do for the channel. So Tonight, what I'm going to do is I am going to kind of walk you through how this table design is going to come up. And you know what, there might be some things that you all could chime in with and your thoughts and ideas. In particular, because, you know, there's the idea of what do we want out of this table? What can we get out of this table? What are the priorities of the table? And then there's certain realistic considerations that need to be made. You know, you can't have a table do everything that you want it to do, because there might be other considerations, and you'll see some of those tonight. And we'll talk about those, about some of the things that we might have to change or shift or work around, and while still trying to maintain the client's, requirements and vision. So anyways, if you're new to us, by the way, we are Knights of Last Call, and we are a channel that normally just talks about TTRPGs, but tonight we're going to be talking about wood. So let me hop over. All right. So this is the original design for Bob's, woodworking table, gaming table. So for context, for those of you who don't know, I had never built a table like this before. Now, this concept of the gaming table has existed for a number of years. When people first started designing them, they really kind of spawned out of what used to be called puzzle tables, which were very, very commonly coffee tables, and like you would have in your living room, a low coffee table, and they usually had some sort of removable lid or a foldable lid, or something like that, where you could put a puzzle in to this like little vault, work on the puzzle, and then when if you weren't finished, you could put the lid back down, and then it became just normal table, and you could get back to your puzzle when you had time. So this idea has been around for a while, but it kind of expanded and grew into this idea of the gaming table, the board gaming table. And let me go ahead and open. So Bob, being enthusiastic about gaming, and this is really kind of like before I was really close with Bob, actually. In fact, I would argue that this project kind of made us very close. But I was starting to get into furniture building, and I was, building stuff and all this other stuff. And Bob said, hey, I'm really excited. I'm gonna buy this. Hold on a second here. Let me pull it up. I'm gonna be buying this table from a company called Wormwood, and this company Wormwood was basically doing a Kickstarter. Okay, here's Wormwood. This is a screenshot from a long time ago. This is from I don't even know when, 2021 or something. Oh, we got rid of it. There we go. So this was the table that Bob was considering getting, and you can see that it is essentially a table with 4 legs and 4 supporting structures that are called aprons that run around the perimeter of the table. The difference is that this section on top, which is called a topper, can be removed, revealing the vaulted area where the where the people can play their board games or whatever. But you can see here, there was a couple caveats. Okay, number one is this thing is quite expensive. Now, Bob was going to get it in maple, which is a cheaper wood. And we ended up doing walnut because Bob was like, well, I'd rather have the walnut, but it was so pricey. And so Wormwood, Bob went to Wormwood. Bob was going to do the Kickstarter. He got sign off from his wife, and they were going to buy it. And I think the price, even for maple, was still like over $2,000. But there was a multi-year wait, just even to be able to pay $2,000+ to get your table sent to you. So, Bob was pretty bummed that he, wasn't going to be able to build it, get it made, because it was just he couldn't bring himself to pay that much money and then have to wait 2 or 3 years potentially. I think it was a 2-year wait, but I think because of production delays, I think that 2 years would have actually ended up being something closer to 3 years. So, so Bob was talking to me, and I said, I've been building furniture. I think we could reverse engineer this. They have enough pictures and enough things on their website. I think I could figure this out. Bob's an architect, and you know, I'm a math guy, so maybe we could figure this out. And so you know, we went over and we went to the Wormwood site, and we sort of roughly built out what Bob was, you know, would ideally have gotten, and we end up with this the image that you see here at a cost of $3,000. And I told Bob, I said, I think we can build this for like less than $1,000 because in materials. And that's with us being a very small shop that, you know, we don't have any sort of scale of production or anything like that. So that is sort of the saga, if you will, of Bob's table and how it got designed. And so you can see that Bob's table is designed in this style. It's basically, if this was a regular table, okay, if this was a regular table, it would not have this bottom, right? And this area here on top, these all would be missing, okay? And you would basically just have, you know, these are your 4 legs and your 4 aprons that tie them together. And then you would have your tabletop, which would get, you know, which would be one solid piece, or you might have, you know, some people have leaves in their table, but that would basically, you know, you would more or less move this over to here and grabbed it from the bottom. And then, you know, boom, that's your table. But obviously the distinct difference here is that we have these, we'll call them, I don't know, arm rails that go around the perimeter of the table. And this is what kind of gives the table that sort of like casual vibe, because you know, that way you can, you know, it's enough for you to basically put your elbows on the edge of the table. So like if we look here, like this is early on. This is Bob's table before we added the rails to it. So this is basically just the table in its sort of rough form with the bottom attached and the 4 legs. Now, a couple things to note about Bob's table while we're talking about it is this table is solid. It is one piece, and it does not use any screws. So this table is not made to come apart. This table is joined using what is called a joinery. Specifically, it is joined together by a process called mortise and tenon joinery. And literally what you do is you have a piece of wood that sticks out from these aprons, these long pieces, and it actually inserts into a hole that is inside the table leg. You use glue, and that might not sound, if you're not a woodworker, you might think glue. Let me tell you something. Modern woodworking glue is a chemical miracle. In many cases, the glue is stronger than the wood. So once these wood-on-wood connections are glued together, and you use clamps in order to keep them compressed while they dry, by the time that the glue is cured, it is essentially indestructible. And a piece of furniture made in this way will last for generations. Because there's no metal fasteners that can wear out. A big problem. I'm just going off on woodworking, but do you know what's nice about woodworking? Whatever. So wood, even after it's dead, is still essentially a gigantic bundle of fibers. And as a result, it can literally swell and compress depending on the humidity level. So wood, we call it breathing, but wood will, in this wintertime, when it's really dry out, the wood fibers will release some of the stored water within their structure, and the wood will compress ever so slightly. And in the summertime, it's usually very humid, and the wood will swell. Now, this is less of a problem in our modern day society because most of us live in climate controlled houses with air conditioners. But trust me, there's a lot of woodworking design that goes into making sure that you allow for this seasonal expansion and contraction of wood movement. The problem is, if you have a table that is joined together by screws, metal doesn't expand or contract or shrink. So if you have a table leg and you have a apron that is butting into it and is being connected by screws, over the years, that wood is going to move kind of breathe in and out, in and out, in and out. But the screws don't change size or shape. So every time the wood expands, it's, pulling on those screw threads. It's yanking that metal out. And then when it compresses back down, it's wiggling it back around. And what can happen over the course of many years, 5, 10 years, those holes become loose. The table becomes wobbly. Your table starts to rack, which is to say, like, it kind of shifts back and forth. And eventually, the table can become unusable, or you might have to repair it, re-drill it, or do something like that. And ultimately, the holes themselves will become so blown out and so worn out that you will no longer basically be able to use the table, and it's junk, which is fine. There's I'm not going to argue the economics of sort of replaceable furniture. But what I wanted to do with this table is design something and build something for Bob that his son or daughter could maybe they'll fight over it. Who gets it after Bob dies. Sorry, Bob. So anyways, so this is the table in its form, and then here we have us after the rails have been put on, and again, so you can see that this is kind of has a wide enough space for you to like rest your elbows in. So, and then, as I said before, though, the thing is the table is a bit of a transformer because we also built a topper for this table. And so, this, I guess I got rid of it. There it is. This topper, this is the same table. This is the same table as this table. So that is basically the table with the lid off, and this is that same table with the lid on. You can actually see here, if we zoom in, like you can see that, there's a little bit of it's a little bit thicker than a normal table would be because of the topper. But this brings up a potential problem. Okay. Which we kind of learned, and we sort of, and by the way, Bob helped me, let me just be clear about this. Bob helped me build this thing. Now, obviously, Bob isn't, a woodworker, but, he wanted to, part of it was, I was going to do it for free. Bob had to, I was like, Bob, you have to pay for the materials. And Bob gave me a nice tip when we were all done. But, I said, Bob, you gotta put in some sweat equity. And, Bob, definitely is doesn't shy away from doing physical labor. So actually I have here so the other thing that we did, because Wormwood does this, is Wormwood has these removable drink holders that use magnets. So actually running along the side of the table is a sort of a groove or a slot that is situated into the side of the table. And at the back of that slot is a metal strip of steel, stainless steel. And then you have these cup holders. Now, this is without the sort of, there's like a metal drop-in that you can put into that hole, which will allow it to hold like a can or a bottle of beer. But when you take that metal cup out, this is so that it's designed to be able to hold a wine glass. And so that is, again, we were basically, I was really trying to build Bob's, what he wanted from from Wormwood. And, ultimately, Bob and, his kids, have continued to use the table. There's Bob and his children hanging out. A little bit of a cool detail that we added kind of late in the design, as I recall. If you can see here, I'm going to zoom in. So, oops. Sorry. The window that I'm using for this is really, really bad. So that's the table, by the way, with the topper on. Just so you know what's up there. So yeah, so the a cool detail here. Oh, I see what I did. Okay. On this table is we ended up routing in this groove which goes around the edge of the table. And Bob did this because Bob was originally wanted a table that he and his friends could play MLB Showdown on, which is a card game that they played as sort of like a league. and they would have two people who could play. And of course, this is a card game where you have like a central area, and players play their cards into this central area to represent who's at bat and who's in defense or whatever. And so Bob and his family and his friends played a lot of these board games, Settlers of Catan, Seven Wonders, games that have cards. So the idea here was that Bob could use this little routed groove, and you can see here, like, put the little cards. And of course, Bob getting into his miniatures and getting into painting, getting into assembling all his stuff. You could put all that crap in there, and then you throw the table topper on, and boom, the whole thing becomes just a normal, ordinary, everyday table. And so then you can use it as you normally would use a table. And again, you can see in this video that the tolerances, meaning like the gap between, this is actually 3 pieces of wood that you're seeing here, 3 separate pieces that are joined together. You can probably very barely make out where that seam is on the 3 pieces, but those 3 pieces come apart, and then underneath that is the vault. And that's how that works. So this was obviously really, really cool, and we loved it, and we did it. And I actually ended up building a couple of these for various other clients who paid me. Bob, again, gave me a generous tip, but, I was basically doing it pro bono for Bob, and Bob put in a lot of equity. Bob did a lot of sanding on his own table. But I ended up building some more of these for other clients and people who were really interested in doing it. And, mostly friends of friends, or friends who, or old coworkers or stuff, people who I, generally speaking, knew. I never really advertised it. But, I charged a pretty, good amount of money. Maybe not $3,000, but I was definitely charging in the many thousands of dollars for these tables. It's a lot of work. But so this is a long, very long-winded way of saying this. What we quickly determine, I should note also, Aaron Smith, our friend who we play games with from the channel, we play at his house. So when we go to Smith's house, it's to play D&D. He has a table. His employees actually bought him this table. Now the employees that I didn't make it. They bought it from another company. I would say it's not as well made as this one maybe is in terms of the quality of the wood and the quality of the joinery, but it's a beautiful table. It's a big table, and it uses a very similar design. And I'll be honest with you, we very quickly determined, as Bob did, that this style of table is not necessarily very good for role-playing games. And the reason for it, basically, is whether you have a laptop or a character sheet or, books at your table, the fact of the matter is this small little, rail here, which is only, 4.5 inches long or wide, is not enough room for you to put your character sheet or put your laptop. Now, Wormwood, the company who, is kind of famous for these, kind of understood this problem. They actually created these things called player desks. They're basically, they look like, like when you have one of those laptop holders, those laptop coolers. It's like about the size of a laptop, and it kind of like clicks onto the side of the table, kind of giving you a, it would almost be like giving you a shelf, something like, it would kind of look like that. It would click on, and then you have this kind of area. But, I don't really like this design. I think it's kind of awkward. It's a weird look, and then you have this strange thing hanging out over it. So I'm not a really big fan of that style of design. And so when it comes to playing a TTRPG, I don't think that this design of table is really all that ideal. So, that's kind of one of the things that I've kind of, determined and kind of come around and learned to it. So when I was talking with Laughing Outlaw about his table, we were talking about different options and different ideas. And one of the things that he wants, him and his wife want a table that can, basically turn into a normal table. That's totally reasonable, totally understandable. And he was also like, I want to play TTRPGs on this. And I said, okay, cool. And he's like, but it would be cool if I could have like the vault area so that I could, maybe play some games. But also, I'd really love to be able to put like a TV into my gaming table and build. And that way we could use that for like electronic battle mats and stuff. And I said, okay, I think we can do this, but I'm going to have to make some design changes. As a result, Laughing Out Loud says, I have to go catch the VOD later. Yeah, you definitely come back and catch the VOD and let me know, because we're designing your table, buddy. Thank you so much. London Matthews, hey, look at that, a super chat. Your 10th super chat, by the way. Tables, like rule systems, can be too fiddly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the clip-on accessories. You're 100% right, because then you got to store those player desks. It's actually kind of a pain in the butt. So, and Space Narwhals has a gaming table, says we rarely use the vault part of ours because of that exact problem. Yeah, it's a really awkward and kind of, problematic thing. The other thing is, like, if I was playing like a big board game, or if I was playing like if you're playing a board game, everybody's got their own player tableau area, or you're playing like a really big game, like, Axis and Allies or something like that, you're really going to use up a lot of this vaulted space. But in most TTRPGs, each player has sort of a, maybe a book and a piece of paper in front of them, or probably a laptop for a lot of people. And then you have the battle mat or the battle grid area, right, where you're putting your minis and miniatures. But you do not no one needs this much space for a battle, in a TTRPG area. And we'll get into some of this, but like, the fact of the matter is this is a lot of wasted space. And what I see a lot of times is people end up putting their character sheets, down here on the bottom, and then you've got your middle, your battle grid area that's kind of like maybe set up here in the middle of the table, and then every player just ends up having this kind of character sheet area in front of them, and it's kind of like, well, and it's awkward though, because it's down low, right? Like, it's at an angle, like you're sitting here and your character sheet is like in front of you at the bottom of the table. Or you're like crunching it up and like writing and erasing on this little narrow window. The point is, I don't think it really works that great for TTRPGs. So the idea was, could we do something differently? Could we design a gaming table that is more in line with, and by the way, let me put it clear, if you use these tables for things like puzzles, or use these things for things like board games that you want to leave set up, this is great, because you have this big open area. You don't really need a huge space. Most board games don't require the kind of real estate that something like a TTRPG would require, even from the player or certainly from the GM. By the way, to say nothing of the fact that if you're the game master, and you're probably sitting here, right? If you're the game master, there is no way that this is enough space for a game master. It doesn't even hold your GM screen. And Wormwood developed and built a whole separate, table insert that they could put over this part of the table to create what essentially was a temporary table. And so that way, like, the GM would have this big area, and it's like, and we would do this sometimes at Smith's house. And then, what would happen? Dice would end up rolling underneath here. It was actually really kind of a pain in the butt. So I don't think that we're going to use this design. So then what we basically want to do, or what we want to think about then, is how do we want to design a table? And my idea, and I'm just going to roughly sketch it here, is we will create a rectangular table that is designed to fit probably, two people on each side comfortably. And then, of course, two people at the ends. So that way you can have a player and up to 5 people. I think that there's a couple things that we can talk about this. Typically, this is me being very, pedantic about TTRPGs. You can play with more players, especially if they are thinner. But in order to make this table be able to fit 8 people, you would have to make the table longer. The problem with making the table longer is that if you make the table longer, your GM, let's say this is our GM right here, okay? That's our GM. You're going to want some sort of area on your table for your battle mat, for your miniatures, right? And ideally, it's centrally located. The problem is if you make your table too long, okay, then what ends up happening is the people down here at the far end of the table, they can't reach the miniatures. Or you put it in the middle, and then then the GM, who is arguably the most important person who needs to get to the miniatures, can't get to the miniatures. Now, London says, what are the pros and cons of a square, 2 to a side? London Matthews, a great question. In fact, I think a 2 to a side table, square table, can be really, really, really good. The problem is, as you noted, it becomes pretty wide. Most tables, most areas are designed for something that is long and maybe not as wide. So it does take up a lot of space. The other thing, which we're going to get to, it's more of an awkward thing, but the other thing that we're going to get to is, remember that Laughing Out Law wants this table to have a recessed area in the center where a TV can be placed to function as a virtual digital battle mat. TVs, by and large nowadays, come in 16 by 9 dimensions. And this means that a TV is basically going to be rectangular. So if you can imagine a square table and you were to put a rectangular TV into the top of that square table, right? Some people would have a lot of room in front of them, and other people would have not enough room. And just, we're over here. I don't know why I'm asking you to visualize things when I'm sitting here with a 3D sketcher. So like, here's our square table, but then we put in this, rectangular TV screen. And so these people, I can have my character sheet in front of me and the TV's right here, but the GM, presuming they sit on the far end, and then the person sitting at the far end, they might only have, 5 or 6 inches before their character sheets and books are on top of the TV. Now you could size it differently. You could be like, oh, well, just make the square bigger. But if you make the square too big, now you're talking about something that's comically too big for a space. And we have to consider how far people can reach. So one of the things that I do when I design a table for gaming is, in some cases, if it's specific for a group of people, I'll even ask them to measure it, is I really want to be cognizant of how much real estate you can realistically reach your hand. And so I always think of this in sort of 2 stages, which is, what can you reach when you're sitting down? And then what can you reach if you're willing to stand up out of your chair and lean over the table? And one of the things that I try to do is so that a character or player can potentially reach, at least maybe 50% of the battle mat area while sitting, and then stand up and maybe reach another 30%. So they can reach about 80% of the area. And so there might be a situation where if you're on our, again, we made this, this was our example of the extended table. If we bring this back to something a little bit more reasonable, this, the GM is pretty much going to be able to reach the entire battle mat, except they might not be able to reach the very end of it. But that's okay, because you've got 1, 2, 3 players who can easily reach it for them, right? So that's the sort of idea of why a square in this case doesn't work. Now, but you are right. It is a really nice design. Now, Damien says, make the table octagonal. It's funny that you say that because this is a design that I have been working on. This is actually a hex table that I'm considering maybe building for Mr. Smith. This is designed, it's basically circular. I mean, it fills the same point as a circular table. The only distinction is, unlike a circular table, most circular tables that you're probably used to are a circular table and they have 4 legs, which means that if you have 6 people sitting around your circular table, 2 or 3 of them have a table leg right in their crotch. So the advantage of a hex-based table is it has 6 legs. And so each person gets their own sort of, carve out. This is my side. This is my side. This is my side. And everybody can equally reach the center because it is not rectangular. It essentially is a circle, just with more sides. It's a regular polygon. So while I think an octagon is probably pushing it, I do think a hexagon is a pretty cool idea. So I've toyed around with that idea myself. Space narwhals. We've talked about using Winston Churchill style pusher thingies to move minis. It's funny that you mentioned that Because Bob, when we were at our original studio, I had a problem reaching the battle mat, and Bob bought me this. It's like a croupier stick, right? From like gambling, right? The little thing that you can use to grab and move around. We never really used it because it was like too awkward to use, but it was funny because we were like, Bob's like, try this out. Maybe this will work. And, you know, it didn't work out that great. So yeah, very, very cool idea. So I would definitely say that is true. If you don't stab a dagger into the real battle mat, what are we even doing here? That's true. So couple of considerations. I don't know if I can just write this on a text, but when you're making a table, you are going to have your top, and then you're going to have underneath it your legs. I have found, generally speaking, that most players in most games are going to require a minimum of 24 inches by 24 inches by 12 inches. Okay. This is the amount of space that at minimum a player will need. Why 24 by 12, right? Well, and I sometimes call this the player mat, actually. Whoa. This is funny. My screen is all wonky because I'm streaming, so like some of my stuff is going off of the screen. Player mat. What the hell just happened? Oh no! I lost my chat log. Hold on a sec. I can't see what you guys are saying. All right. And we're back. Okay, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. London says, is that anywhere near a standard MTG playmat? Hopefully this still works. Yes. Okay, great. A standard MTG playmat is about 24 by 14. So I was actually gonna take this a level further and say I usually make them 24 by 14, but that as a minimum. But the reason why I say 24 by 12 is a minimum space is because, so yes, it's very close to a Magic the Gathering playmat. So if you can imagine a Magic the Gathering playmat, that's what we're talking about here. And so the reason I do that is because I want to be able to give the player the ability to put a 8.5 by 11, okay, aka a normal sheet of paper, except this is not 8.5 by 11. It's 22 by 8.5. What is 22 by 8.5? It is a 20. Oh, sorry, not 22. Jeez, I'm getting all flustered here. Sorry. 11 inches tall, 8.5 inches wide is 11 by 17. This is the size of a book that has been opened and is laying in front of you. And this gives you enough space to then have a character sheet. So you can have your open book here, and then you can have your character sheet next to it. And that's like a minimum amount of space. Obviously, the tolerances here are pretty small, so I prefer to give players a little bit more room. Now, again, this is 24 inches wide by 12 inches deep. I prefer to give them maybe 26 inches or 28 inches or 30 inches left to right, or, and give them like 14 inches or 15 inches from the depth. And that way you have a little bit more, wiggle room to play around with your, character sheet, dice, and all that other stuff. So to that end, that means I need a table top that can support 6 of these player areas. But we have another consideration that we need to make, which is, actually I can just copy this in here. Window capture, Excel. Hey, look, it's Excel. Okay, so our player area is 24 inches by 12 inches. And we're going to need 6 of those. And that's at a minimum. We'd probably like to do more than that. But we also want to have a TV in the middle of our area. So now we have to start thinking about what size do we want our TV to be? Well, the problem is if you look at TV sizes, they always give you the measurement in terms of the diagonal from left to right of the screen. It's not really that useful. However, if you think about it, the most common TV sizes that we would probably be interested in, there are 42 or 43 inch TVs, 50 inch TVs, 55 inch TVs, 65 inch TVs. Okay, so that's the measurement that they give you. This is the TV size that is listed on the sheet. But what does that mean in terms of the length and the width of that actual TV? So for this, I just use Google because they usually give you this, handy chart for this type of stuff. So something like a 42 inch TV is going to be somewhere around 37 by 21. A 50 inch TV is going to be about 44 by 25. And a 55 inch TV is going to be about 48 by 27. So that's how many inches that TV is. So why does that matter to us? Well, we could start to think about it in terms of how much real estate do you really need? Most people, are going to be playing this on a 5-foot grid level because remember, we're thinking about using that TV to digitally broadcast a battle mat. So if we think of this in terms of, area of combat, then this 37 inches is going to be like 185 feet by 21 feet, by 105 feet. So in other words, this is going to be an area that is probably going to be large enough to handle pretty much any RPG battle that you or your group will ever need. I cannot really think of too many more standard TTRPG scale type things where you are going to need a bigger size than this. We could even potentially go smaller, but we can talk about this. But, when you make the screen smaller, then you also need to worry about things like, can people reach it? Does it look weird to have this tiny little monitor in the middle of a big table? So we want to strike a balance, right, between the screen in the table sort of being a presence and having a presence in the table, but also not, taking over the whole thing. So we need to balance it. And again, this is a standard size TV. You're going to be able to find 42 inch or 43 inch TVs pretty standard, pretty easily. Because one thing I need to think about is, it's possible that the TV breaks or, wants to be upgraded. So, I want to make sure that this is something that isn't like specifically designed to fit some weird size TV that will never get, used. All right. So if we go, let's say with this 42 inch TV, then we need an interior space that is going to be, let's say 37 by 21. Let's give ourselves an inch of wiggle room. And so we'll make the area 38 by 22. Okay. So if we go back to SketchUp here, then I am going to, there it is. I am going to make a rectangle that is 38 by 22. That would be our, presumably this would be our, let me see if I have I'll make it gray here. This would presumably be our TV. All right. That's our area. That's our sort of vaulted area on the game table. So we talked before about giving people enough space to be able to have maybe 13 or 14 inches away from this. So what would happen if we were to take 14 inches out, 14 inches out, 14 inches out this way, and 14 inches out that way? Well, then we would end up with a table that would look a bit like this. So this table has are those measurements including the non-screen part of the TV? That's a great question, Lollipop Candy. And I think one of the things that I'll actually talk about is the bezel size here does matter a lot. Because if the screen is a certain size, you need to know how wide the actual area of the TV is. That's a really important point. So you want to be able to kind of, but the advantage I have is that a lot of TVs today have pretty small bezels. Sometimes there's that area at the bottom of the TV that we'll have to, sort of take into account because they're not like monitors, right? Where you literally have like the whole thing is just basically screen real estate. There's usually some sort of chunkier area at the bottom, but more and more I find that TVs are getting to be pretty thin in terms of the bezel. Now we gave ourselves an extra inch around, but we may actually be better off putting in 2 inches on each dimension. That way we have a little bit more wiggle room. But I think we can work with this. But that is a totally valid point and good to notice. So if this was our table, now again we just took 15 inches on each side. So we've got. So I said before that I want to be able to give everybody at a minimum 24 by 12. And like I said, really probably more like 24 by 14. So this area here, this is sort of our player mat. That would be where one player would sit. And actually, we can actually put these onto the center. There we go. So that's where one player would sit. That's where another player would sit. Again, that's just aligned to the center. And we'd obviously have the same thing on the other side. And then we'd have one of these over here like that. And one of these over here like that. That would be the GM spot. Now, there's very little minimal overlap here. So I actually don't think that's that bad, right? This would give each player the minimum size that we would want. But as I said before, I do like the idea of people having a little bit more room if they could. Now, this is 14 inches to the edge of the screen. And I think that dimension is fine. What I would like to do is maybe give people a little bit more horizontal distance. Now, of course, the problem is if I start to make the table longer, okay, because if I make the table longer, that'll give these people more space. And it'll give these people more space if we do it that way. I don't know what just happened there. But what it will do is it will push our GM and our FAR players further away from the TV. So we do need to be kind of concerned about it. So another thing that I want to look at while we're looking at this sort of minimum requirement is tape measure. When you're sitting at a table, I do know this, a measurement already, and you reach out and you can, see how far you can reach. And now I'm a taller person, so I understand that's not for everybody. But generally speaking, I find that most people can very safely reach about 24 inches from where they're standing or from where they're sitting. And if you stand up or kind of nudge out of your seat and lean over the table and reach a little further, you can usually extend that to about 30 to 32 inches. So if we could imagine for a moment that we had a player sitting right here, we can draw their reach in the form of a circle. Okay, so this is a 24-inch circle. So sitting in that position, that is what a player could reach. But if they were willing to stand up a little bit, then they could reach a little bit further. So you can see that there's always going to be a compromise, right? Because the bigger you make the table, the more people you put on the table, and the more room you give people in order to have the room for their stuff, then the less of the area that they're going to be able to do, less of the battle mat that they're going to be able to reach. Now, you all are role-playing game players. Obviously, and by the way, there's a lot of X factors to this, right? When you stand up in your position, you can lean to the right and, whatever like that. But the fact of the matter is, if something's going on in this corner of the battlefield, the player sitting here and the player sitting here are going to have a really hard time reaching it, right? Whereas this player can pretty much reach 3 of the 4 quarters of the battlefield. And you know what? I think that's okay, especially as long as every player can reach the center of the table, because 99% of the time, almost everything happens within this just little defined area right here in the middle. So that is probably the most important area that players need to be able to reach without having to do it. Because again, Now, I will say, in that hex design, which I was showing you earlier, we have toyed with the idea for years. I haven't built it yet, but of making a lazy Susan that is integrated into the table, and that way you put your battle mat on the lazy Susan, and you can, on your turn, if you need to, you can click, 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 click. You can turn you can basically rotate the battlefield around over to you. I don't know how practical that is, but it is something that I've thought about and dreamed about. For times. Now, Space Narwhals, which is an excellent point, says, I think it's also good to make it a little on the roomier side so that you could put 3 to a side occasionally. And you know what? You're absolutely right. Now, in a perfect world, Space Narwhals, actually something that we can talk about here. Let me bring up my Excel again. Standard dining room table measurements says that you need 24 inches for each diner. So if you're thinking about the classic, Thanksgiving dinner, because typically a seat, like a chair is about 18 inches wide. So if you have an 18-inch chair, that gives you 3 inches of space on the left and 3 inches of space on the right until the next person's area. And of course, they would have 3 inches on their left and 3 inches on their right. So really there's 6 inches between the edge of your seat and the edge of the next seat, half a foot. It's enough. It's not a lot. Okay. But it can work, especially if you have smaller people. What I like to do if I design a table and I don't have to worry about anything like a TV is I like to give my 2 players 36 inches for each player. Because what ends up happening then is you can get 2 players in, each player gets 36 and 36, which of course is 72 inches. But if push comes to shove, you can fit 3 people in there and it's 72 inches. So this way you basically have like the luxury, like you have all the space in the world that you need at 36 inches, or if you have some, bigger gamers, but if you have a need to, you could potentially fit 3 in at a side. But of course, remember, this is the distance between the inside leg edge and the outside edge of the next leg. So if you're talking about building at 72, that's already 6 feet. Okay. That's 72 inches. That's just between the table leg. Then each table leg is going to probably be about 3.5 inches wide. So you've got 2 of them. So that's another 3.5 inches wide. And of course, most tables don't just stop at the edge of the legs, right? There's a little bit of an overlap. You might have, let's say at the end of the table, you might have a 4-inch overlap on each side. And what that ends up meaning is that your table is now 87 inches long from tip to tip. That is 7.25 feet. That's a long table. Now, to be complete, now you might, for a dining room table, that's totally fine. I mean, it's a bigger table. I mean, once you get above 6 feet, it's getting into the bigger table space for sure. Okay, this is a proper 8-person table, just 6 if you want to be really roomy. The consideration that we have to take into account, though, when it comes to a TTRPG table, is if we make the table too big, then people aren't going to be able to reach the central area of the gaming battle mat area. So there's kind of a push and a pull here, right? Between giving you more space, but also making it so that people can actually reach the central area of the battle mat. Now, of course, if you're not playing with battle mats, if everything you're doing is theater of the mind, then this really opens up a lot of space for you. And in fact, I think, I remember growing up when I was a young kid, I was learning to play D&D. We'd go over to my uncle would pick me up. He lived in the same town as me, and he would drive me out of town to the kind of the boonies where my cousin lived. My cousin was about 10 years older than me. My uncle was about 18 years older than me, because my cousin was my oldest uncle's first son, and then my uncle that I used to play D&D, who taught me how to play D&D, was my dad's youngest brother. So like the age difference between him and my cousin was pretty small. Anyways, they had this massive table at the house where we would go to play. But of course, they didn't play with a battle mat. They didn't play with grids. They didn't play with minis. So like none of it mattered. Sometimes people would be like playing at like another table next to the main table when they had like 10 players show up. But it didn't matter, right? Because all you needed was a space for your dice and your paper and your books. We didn't need, the modern stuff. Anyways, so I like the idea of a bigger space, and I love going with 72 inches. It's a big table, but that way you can have room for 3 players on a side. But it does run into some gaming dimensional issues. Yes, the Mark Seifter approach. Yes, absolutely. Lucius says, I love this. Very inspirational. It's -50 where I am right now, though. So I'll be rolling in my bed, dreaming of working on something like this in the summer and maybe the late spring. That'd be awesome. Yeah, I mean, my shop is not heated or air conditioned. So when it's cold out, it's cold out. So I think, this is probably going to be a little bit too tight for our tolerances. So we really need to think about, and again, we've got this dimensions of here, of this TV. Now you could say, well, we could make the space bigger, but if we make the table bigger and we leave the TV the same, then it's going to be a longer reach to get to that TV. And I like the idea of keeping a balance around what visually this table would look like, right? You can imagine that each of these players has, their book in front of them and their paper and their pencils, but the books are kind of nuzzled up right next to the edge of the battle mat. It would look like it was a very full table. Nonetheless, I do think we need to make the table a little bit bigger. I like how this stream, by the way, this stream is nothing like our normal stream. Our normal stream is somewhat focused on like a TTRPG topic or whatever. I was just home. I had nothing to do. I was going to do this work anyways, and I wanted to stream this, kind of talk about the design of. And if you know what, maybe there's other people out here who aren't normal Knights of the Last Call fans, and you've always wondered like what goes into designing a table for TTRPG specifically. This can kind of give you some thought process here. Yes, it's the whys and wherefores of the dimensions of a table. So, what happens if we make this table a little longer? So in order to make this table a little longer, we would need to, excuse me, we got our TV here. And you know what? Just because I think actually, I think Lollipop made a great observation. So this original table was 38 by 22. So let's make this 24 by 40, right? So this is our new TV, because this gives us a little bit of a bigger area in case the TV has some, wider spaces or bezels. It gives us a little bit more room. And we kind of want the TV to be a little bigger because we want the table to be a little bit bigger to give people more room. So what if we were to go and put out, let's give everybody 14 inches again on the sides, but let's give them 15 and a half on the ends. So this is going to put the game master and the player at the end a little bit further away from the TV than the other players. But I think that's probably okay. So here's our new TV, our news table. You can see it is the TV dimension's the same, but it is now a longer table. Each person has a little bit more room to to play and do their thing. So what if we make a slightly wider player mat? So here is a 14-inch player mat, but let's make it 28 by 14. So this is a much wider player area. So if we do that, and that, and that, and so now we have a a little bit wider. Instead of a 24 inch wide space, we have a 28 inch wide space. But our table dimension is now 71 inches long. So the table itself is just under 6 feet. And we would probably make this actually go up to 6 feet just to make it a nice even number. But what does that mean underneath the table? So like I said before, if you can imagine, you're gonna have a table leg somewhere under here. Let's say we had a 3-inch overhang here and a 3-inch overhang here, and we've got a 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch table leg, and we've got a 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch table leg. So the space between these table legs is 58 inches. So remember, we said before that you should have 24 inches for each person sitting. So 24 plus 24 is 48. This is 58. So we have 10 extra inches total between the two players. Not probably enough to fit in another table or another chair, though. It'd be more roomy. It'd be more comfortable, but it wouldn't actually allow you to fit in a third gamer. So to fit in a third gamer, we'd have to make this table even longer. But now we're running into a certain problem. And this is where you all can chime in and let me know what you would think you would want to do. Number one, this is something that Laughing Out Loud will have to answer for me, is how important is it that the table potentially be able to support 8 people? Are the people he usually plays with, his current player group, are they, smaller sized, full-bodied, big-boned, ladies and gentlemen, or are they, smaller, more petite sized? That makes a big difference in terms of the importance of having that extra space. But if we start to make this table wider, we are going to be taking the GM and the player away, right, from the battle mat. Now, I'm curious for people who are watching, because one idea that we could potentially do is we could make the table wider and actually kind of design it for 5 people, and we could put the GM here, right? We could put the GM on one of the wide sides. I know that's not how most people play it, because I think the person who really needs to be able to reach the battle mat the most is usually the GM. They're the ones setting things down. They're the ones putting the different things in. So if we were to expand the size of this table, then you could potentially have a situation where you've got the GM sitting here, and then you have a player here, and a player here, and you have a player here, and you have a player here. That's your 4-player plus GM setup. But if we made the table wide enough, we could fit in potentially a 3rd player on this far long side. Now, this would give the GM a ton of space, but it would mean, remember, in this scenario, this table would be much wider. This person would probably be sitting like over there. And the GM would be like here. So what would end up happening, though, in this world where we expanded everything, is that the people on the left side of the table would pretty much be unable to reach the right side of the table. And the people on the right side of the table would pretty much not be able to reach the left side of the battle mat. Particularly because, the TV, we're constrained. They are 16 by 9 dimensions. They don't make square TVs. Kind of cool if they did, but they don't. At least, that we can't. So now this might be a nice setup, because now, your GM has all this, extra room. Let me see if I can get in on this. There we go. So now your GM has all this extra room for, maps and screens and all this other stuff. And your TV is more or less, let's see if we can find the middle. Cool. There's the middle. Okay. So now we've got this world where the TV is in the middle. The GM is sitting kind of right here. They have pretty much complete access to the battle mat, probably except for these far corners, and you could potentially have 5 people. And now you would have, some space over here and some space over here, but, that the GM might not be reaching to, but, it could still be the case. But the problem is this player, this guy right here, this lady, she is 22 inches from the battle mat. So sitting down, she will basically just be able to reach the edge of the battle mat. Standing up, if it could be a guy who's maybe shorter, standing up, they would have a hard time reaching even kind of the center of the battle mat. So that is the trade-off, right? That they won't be able to easily reach the center. And again, remember I said the center is sort of the most important area for the game, because that's where people need to be able to reach. And so these are kind of the trade-offs, and this is some of the stuff that I need to sort of run past Laughing Out Law, because the original idea that I had for Laughing Out Law's table was, again, more of one of these traditional vaults that we talked about with Bob's table. But now, thinking about the design and the dimensions and the needs, because we have to because there's other considerations to make too. If you have a TV, that means that you are going to have to put a, what's the word I'm looking for here? You're going to have power, electricity running to it. And it can't be a sealed vault because it'll get too hot in there. So you're going to have some sort of vents or something in the bottom of this area to allow the heat from the TV to escape. Let's see here. Jason, what is this? This is just me talking about woodworking planning and how I design tabletop role-playing game tables, and me trying to meet the specific challenge of a contest winner from our channel who won a table. Yeah, side GMing. Yeah, it's like you're strafing. I don't know. I just think it's natural for GMs to sit at the head of the table, but realistically, there's no reason that they have to. Yeah, it does make a good use for the hex table. The problem with the hex table is, Commando, nothing fits it. It's not designed for it. It's weird. It's awkward. There's a lot of problems that go in with the hex table. It is an unusual thing. And a hex table tends to be very wide. It's like almost like a big square, and you need a much weirder and wider area for it. Now, yeah, you could have a square TV, but that doesn't really solve too much of your issues. And honestly, I just think that that's going to be more awkward than it's worth, because you're going to have to slide it in there. Because remember that one of the things that Laughing Out Law would like to be able to do with this table is take the TV out of this central vault area and be able to put something like a board game into it. Now, could you put like a massive board game in there? Maybe not, but could you fit a standard size, Root or Oath or Axis and Allies or Risk board into that area? You absolutely could. So you may not have the real estate that you had with the other version of the table, right? The one that I already built. It's actually probably easier for me to pull up the photo. Yeah. So in this photo, which I built for Bob, you have a ton of real estate for the, any sort of board game or dimensional area. But if you could imagine that the central vault of this table was smaller, so that it would just fit basically still a fairly big size TV, but you would have more room for the players for their books and their papers and their dice instead of this tiny little, gap here, then, or this tiny little rail. But you could still put most board games in there. It would work just fine. Let's see here. A bench for 3 people could be less length than 3 chairs, I think. Stan, it absolutely could. I don't know. Some people may not want a bench, but a bench is a great option. I also, by the way, Stan, have a secret belief about benches. I think benches lead, and I'm not even kidding you. This is a conversation that we have had, Aaron and I. We think that benches lead to more engaged players because you can't lean back. There's nothing to lean back on. So when you're on a bench or a stool, there's no way for a player to be like leaning back. The only thing that you can do on a bench is kind of lean in. If you want to rest your elbows on something, you have to lean in. And it kind of, I think, leads to a higher level of engagement. We've actually talked about this before. It's interesting. Now, Jason says, or get a bigger TV. Well, there's a couple of issues with getting a bigger TV. Number one, if we get a bigger TV, okay, the price goes up a lot. Number two, because we haven't really talked about this, but if you get, if you're doing a TV for a, let me put it this way. How do I put this? You need to get a nice TV because resolution, right? A lot of people think resolution, which, you know, you think 1080, right? 1080p. You've heard of that. You've heard of 4K, right? And that is literally the number of pixels that is on a TV, the number of individual little cells. The problem is, so people think 4K is better. The problem is, if you have 4K pixels, you have something like 3,840 pixels by like 2,500 pixels, right? So that it's like a big grid of pixels. But if you make the TV bigger, but you keep the number of pixels the same, then what ends up happening is when you're really close to the TV, like you would be in this position, you'll see how pixelated it is. And so if you get a bigger TV and you want it to work for this kind of setup, you need to be thinking about a 6K or an 8K TV, which has a much higher resolution, because otherwise you're going to get crazy pixelation. And you pretty much couldn't even get away with using a 1080. You'd have to use like a 4K TV minimum at this size. If I went bigger, if I went to this is a 43-inch TV. If I went to a 50 or 55, I think you'd have to go to at least a 6K or an 8K. So that is the downside. The other thing, if you make the TV bigger, then if I still want the players to have this really large frame or bezel around the TV, right, so that they can actually, you know, have space for their books and stuff, then this area here has to become bigger because the TV got bigger. But if that becomes bigger, now the players are even further away from each other and they're further away from the opposite side of the battle mat. So there's definitely a sweet spot. Also, if you get a bigger TV, most people are using miniatures on the TV. So you're still only going to be using a 5 feet to 1 inch grid, right? That's a standard size grid, like on a Chessex mat or any sort of battle mat that you would buy is 5 feet equals 1 inch. 95% of your TTRPG battles are going to be able to take place within, say, 10 squares by 10 squares, 10 by 15 squares. That's 50 feet by 75 feet in RPG terms, right? That's a big room, right? Like, I mean, you might have some massive cavern, but you might have some massive outdoor fight. But even then, like, how do you do that on your Chessex battle mat? You don't. You have to make stuff up, or you make, approximations. So when you have a really big TV, you could be like, yeah, we could have a battle the size of a football field here. But how many times in your RPG career are you using a battle mat that is literally 500 feet by 300 feet? You're just not. You're not doing it most of the time. Most of the time, you're going to be doing, 30 to 60 feet wide by, maybe 40 to 80 feet long. And you really don't need a lot of TV, for that. Oh, Commando, Abomination Vaults you could practically do on a smartphone. Okay. I'm not even kidding, by the way. I mean, a lot of rooms in the Abomination Vaults, I'm not even kidding you, are like 15 feet by 20 feet or like 10 feet by 15 feet. That's only 2 inches by 3 inches on a 5-foot scale. A 2 inch by 3 inch would fit on this. Maybe a 3 inch by 5 inch. This is probably what this is. 3 inches by 5 inches. 3 inches by 5 inches, by the way, is 15 feet by 25 feet. Guess what? There's a lot of rooms in Abomination Vaults with fights in them, mind you, that would fit onto this battle screen. So now we're talking. Now we're talking. It's like, all right, here's the Storm Giant. Okay, and here's my cool little fighter guy. I mean, look at that. Actually, look at that. That's perfect. A Storm Giant. Is it a Storm Giant? Oh, it's an Eldritch Giant. An Eldritch Giant is huge. So he's supposed to be a 15-foot wide base. Look at that. He fits He fits perfectly on a phone. So there you go. Boom, 15 feet, huge mini versus a medium-sized mini, and you're done. So yeah, you're absolutely right. When it comes to abomination vaults, you don't need much. Patent that right now. Oh man. Let's see. Would it be crazy to somehow make use of a projector instead of a TV? It would not be crazy, Commando. It would not be. However, that is not what the client wanted. And also remember that the client still wants there to be a physical vault that is in the table so that they can remove the TV and use that vaulted area to maybe set up a board game or something like that. So there's going to be a big vault there anyways. So we don't have to we might as well do that to that point. And also, again, those projectors, those have their own sets of problems. Number one, they tend to be very expensive, the good ones that you would need. Number two, you've got to have a way that you can mount it above. And if this is in a normal room in the house, your husband or your wife may not want you to be mounting projectors onto the ceiling, just for your gaming. So that's another consideration to take into a point. So that being said, there's a fantastic, it's a fantastic tool set. And I mean, I don't know what situation we're going to set up in Smith's basement, but I'm definitely, Smith's basement is like, it's only for gaming, right? So, that is a possibility for his situation. Let's see. So if the TV is projecting a screen, there's probably at least one laptop there somewhere. More points to the side DM position. The DM could use the extra space. That's a great point. You could have your 4-panel DM screen in front of you. You've maybe got your adventure notes. And this is assuming that you are an analog GM who's mostly running out of a book. And you've got, maybe some NPC back there. But then off to the side, you have your laptop. And you'll have plenty of room for that because of that. So I think the side position is underrated. And I think it's something that we should be considering. Although I need to talk to my my client, my patron who won this. By the way, if you're new or if you're just joining us, I am building this table, okay, out of real hardwood, which I mill myself, by the way. I don't cut the tree down myself, but I basically buy raw wood, and then I mill it down into dimensions, and then I use mortise and tenon joinery, hand planes. Like I do a very rustic heirloom quality. I am building this table for one of my patron members because they won the contest last year. And then I'm delivering it to them and they live on the other side of the country from me. So, cheers. But I do think that that's a great example, a good idea for that. Exactly, Damien. Paizo maps are designed to be on a flip mat. That is absolutely right. It's not about, they have print, look at what we're doing right now. We're building this table, but we're having to make certain compromises and we're having to make certain things because of the realities of the situation. And Paizo's no difference. You can have plexiglass over the TV so that you don't ever have to take out the TV. That way the flat surface can have a velvet mat roll on top of that. So Thrill Killix, you are ahead of the game, buddy, because that is something that I definitely am thinking about doing. In fact, I'm almost assuredly going to do exactly what you just described. I'm going to have there be let me see here. Take a look at version 6. Okay. So this is a version of the table that, I was playing around with. And in this version of the table, you can see that there is a lip in this vaulted section. And basically you take a piece of, the TV will be underneath that section, right there. And then a piece of plexiglass would essentially go inside this, inside this dimension here. I'm on the move tool. So you'd have a piece of glass right here. Colors, fabric, glass. There we go. That didn't really work, did it? So yeah. So you'd have like the TV would be a piece of glass here, and then you could take a piece of neoprene or of like a velvet mat, and we could get it sized, and then you could roll that out and just kind of put it on top here like that. And then when you did that, maybe you make it a nice, I don't know, charcoal gray or something like that, or, I don't know, hot fuchsia. And then that way you have this little lip, it's about an inch tall, and then, boom, there you go. And so, yeah, so that is definitely something that I have considered, for that exact purpose. And then what's nice about that then is for this bottom section here, right, I can go ahead and I can drill, holes and stuff that will allow us to, run cords and cables up into this cavity, which will allow you to put the TV in and then not really disrupt the rest of the play experience. So definitely what I'm kind of leaning into and thinking about. But even then, you can see here that in this scenario, in this, kind of original build, you've got 14 inches of player space. It's a 52-inch wide TV table, which is much wider than a traditional dining room table. Just FYI, have you ever been yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's definitely going to be holes and stuff like that that are going to be drilled for that for sure. Because otherwise it's going to get way too hot in there, and we need some way of airflow. I've even toyed around with the idea through Acrylics of like mounting like a computer, because I have to run power there anyways, so I could run it into like a distribution, and then maybe like wire in like a computer exhaust fan so that it can literally pull air in and stuff. Anyways, just trying to think, kind of dealing with the issues. Because then the other thing too is like once you run power, then it's like you want to start thinking about like, well, should we mount like, people have, should people have power charging stations? Maybe we can mount like a wireless charging unit or something in two places on the battle mat. I don't know. That's like nice to have. It's not really affecting the woodworking or the joinery. But again, in this situation, these two people have plenty of room, but you would never be able to fit a third person, in there. And so that is the consideration. Absolutely. Space Narwhals, I assume you're talking about the charging station or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. So hold on one second. I muted myself. I'm sorry. I was going to say, you want to see something extra? I said, what is that? That is merch. That is merch that Smith had made for one of his campaigns. He also had the campaign book, bound. This is his home campaign. It was just for like this is like for 4 players. It's just a literal book with art and everything like that. Obviously, this was not we didn't publish this. This is just, that's why, we're using art that, from other things, because it was just for our own public use. But yeah, everybody got one of these, and you got a t-shirt, and I don't know where it is, but I also have a big mug. Anyways, sorry about that. I think you should drill vent holes to the side to mount a fan. Yeah, I do think that's the case. Now, Thrillkillix says the fan will be really noisy unless you can find a really quiet fan. Actually, the key, Thrillkillix, is to get a big fan and to run it at really low RPMs. The RPMs are what make the fans really loud. And if the fan is big enough, or you have enough of them, they can run much slower, and then that will still pull in enough, cubic feet per minute to keep the area chilled. Again, these, this is the kind of stuff that you have to, sort of, kind of think about when you're doing that kind of stuff. Look, I'm not necessarily saying what you should do. I'm just saying Smith is extra as fuck. Let's just put this here. I mean, here, it even has, again, this is for us. On the back, there's like a back cover blurb. Enter a world of legends. The world has been brought to the brink of destruction. Ancient god wizards have brought forth a calamity that has left the world in ruin. Magic has ripped the land apart. Monsters rise in the darkness, and people surrender hope in what is now a dying world. Yet still, great mysteries and wonders wait for those with the courage and will to seek them. You are one of these few, a brave adventurer who, through sheer determination or will carve out a meaningful life or die in the attempt. What will your legend be? Legends. A campaign by Aaron Smith. Anyways. Nope. No, Smith's got you beat. He's crazy. Anyways, so yeah, I definitely really like Thrill Killix's suggestion. Now again, we also have to make sure that the client's ultimately the ones who's going to make the final call for this. But again, I think that this gets to everything that he wanted, and that is to say that he wanted a. Do I have? Yeah. Do I have? No. Okay. And again, the key thing here with this table. Let me see if I have another table. And because there was an idea that I had too, because remember, he wants this table to be, coverable and so that it looks like a normal table. And, the thought process, you might think, oh, well, you just make an insert and drop it into the hole, right? You've already got this lip around the edge. Why not just create a insert that would drop into there? And this is what I was talking earlier about wood movement and why this doesn't work. Number one, this seam here will always be gappy, right? It will always be very gappy. It'll shift. It'll, in the wintertime, it'll expand, it'll constrict, and you'll have this kind of loose fit, and you'll have this weird ridge around the middle of your table. But the biggest problem is wood expands, and it expands at different rates. And that means that this piece here could easily shatter or buckle or rip itself apart, because it doesn't have the right enough room to expand within this frame. If this frame were to constrict more than this wood in the middle constricted, it might get jammed and you might not be able to get it out. Also, if you wanted to make this a really nice flush fit, how are you getting this thing back out again? There's no finger holes, right? There's no handles. So ultimately what we have to do when we cover this thing is for example, if this table was, this one's 60, so this is a little bit of an awkwardness. But what you end up having to do is you end up having to create, these, sort of leaves that go on top of the table. And basically, you probably make 3 of them or 4 of them. It depends on what you want to do. And these basically sit on top of the table. And this seam is much more blendable. Remember the pictures of Bob's table, right? Right, like that. This piece of wood here. This is Bob's gaming table that we built him. This is 3 separate pieces of wood that link together on the top of his table, right? Remember that this table that you're seeing here in the video, it's that table. It's the same table, just with the cover on. And with the cover on, this completely blends together, and it is fairly seamless, and almost no one would notice the difference. Plus, we are used to having tables have sometimes like a horizontal line running across them, because we're used to tables with leaves right? And when you expand the table, it usually has it leaves a gap. But that was one of his requirements, which is I want this table to basically be able to be seamless and just look like it's a normal dining room table. It does introduce an additional complication, which is, okay, where do you store these things, when you take them off, which is totally fair. But, that way you move them out of the way, and you can imagine that you'd have your TV right here ready to go with the plexiglass on top of it. Or you might have the plexiglass on top of it with a neoprene, almost like a Magic the Gathering style mat, which we have cut to fit this dimension. And you could put your board game pieces, you could put your game of life, you could put a puzzle in there. Now you don't have as much room as if the vault was this big, right? You're losing that real estate. You're gaining that real estate on the outside, which is going to increase your ability to use this for TTRPGs. And as we are a TTRPG channel, and Laughing Out Loud did win this as a TTRPG through a TTRPG Patreon, I feel like we need to make TTRPGs the primary consideration. Beowulf says, ask him to make a PDF of the DTX rules he wrote up and share it with the patrons. He already made a PDF of the DTX rules he wrote up. In terms of sharing it with the patrons, that probably won't happen because of me. Just because it's not really tested, and he put it together quickly, and that was supposed to be more like an internal play testing document. Actually, it's Friday night, we're hanging out. We toyed around with the idea last year of, maybe, should we try to throw our hat into the ring and maybe, I don't know, think about designing some sort of game. But there's a lot of considerations to be made, including how busy we are. But the other thing we were is look, there is so much stuff coming out over the next year or two, right? So many the new 5th edition, Pathfinder 2 Core will finally release. You have Starfinder 2 in 2025. You have MCDM RPG. You have Tales of the Valiant. You have Vagabonds. You have the Brandon Sanderson RPG. There's just so many new RPGs coming out that it's going to be, I think, really crowded as people try to move in on this. So it just didn't seem like the right time. But so I don't know. It's possible. Maybe, I never say never, but it is a possibility. James says, if it's the same species, they should move relatively the same amount. No, James, you're right. Wood species do tend to contract and shrink at the same time. That being said, James, there's a lot of X factors. The one thing is that a piece of wood will move. It doesn't really change its length, okay? But it will change its width and its depth. Now, its height, right? In other words, wood fibers do not get longer, okay? They'll get wider and they'll get thicker, but they don't get longer. So trees don't swell upwards. Well, what that would mean is if I were to put a piece of wood into this space like this, what would end up happening, assuming that the boards that I made this, because I'd have to make this from planks of wood. I wouldn't want to make this out of plywood. I mean, I'm trying to make a furniture quality piece of wood here. So I would have to make these from laminated planks of wood, right? So that, again, showing this video for the 30th time. This is 3 table toppers, but you can see where individual boards of wood were glued together, right? You can see the distinction between the different pieces. But that means that this table, this piece, would not expand in this direction. It would expand in this direction. The problem is the amount that a piece expands or contracts is directly proportional to its width. In other words, a wide piece of wood is going to move a lot more proportionally than a small piece of wood. And since these are different sizes and different pieces of wood, each of these individual wood planks is going to move, say, a quarter inch. Quarter inch, that's a lot, but we'll say 1/16 of an inch. 1/16, 1/16, 1/16, 1/16. That's 4/16. That's a quarter of an inch. This whole frame might move a 1/16 of an inch, or maybe an 1/8 of an inch. And so the middle part of this will have expanded more than the outside part. It's just, I've seen a lot of woodworking projects go belly up because people did not appreciate how much wood could move. The best way to solve this would be to use plywood. Because of the way plywood is engineered, it's wood fiber, real thin, and then it's layered on top of each other. It doesn't really move at all because the layers of wood are alternating and they go at 90-degree angles. But it's supposed to be a piece of fine furniture, so I wouldn't want someone to have a big plywood square in the middle of their table. Slots in the apron, they slide in and sit under the table while you play. Space Narwhals, I've thought about that, about putting either slots or maybe putting some sort of, like rack system underneath. The problem is my table slots, because of the vault, my leaves, right, are just as wide as the table. So, right, that means, that, I'll grab one of these ones. We have these ones. That means that the, oh my God. So that means underneath here, you have this problem where it would overlap this part of the table. Be kind of weird. It's like you could have it like this. But then it's like sticking out over there. So because remember, it's wider than the table. It's just as wide as the table is. So now you could put it lengthwise, I suppose. But then if you put it lengthwise, I don't think there's enough space to put more than 2 or 3. You couldn't put all 3, is what I'm saying. So you could put so that works, kind of, sort of. Yeah, it's just kind of a problem. That's how mine works, but ours has the 4.5-inch band around the edge so that the inserts are smaller. Yeah, so what Space Narwhals is talking about is he has a style of game. Do you by any chance, Space Narwhals, do you have the UGT or whatever? Do you have the ultimate gamer table? I'm just curious if you do. Or something. It's called something like that. The ultimate gamer table, ultimate table gaming or something. The way that Space Narwhals is set up is there's just a series of just planks like this in the middle, and these are each individual pieces, and you can basically just take them out one at a time, so they don't cover the whole length of it. So yeah. Design it so that it creates a shelf for the GM while playing. Well, I'm like, that's actually not a bad idea. Table of ultimate gaming. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That is what Smith has. That is the same table that he has. So, so you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the fact that when you put those inserts in to cover the game vault, okay, you know 2 things. Number one, you know that that's not a tight fit. You can definitely tell that there's a bunch of slats of wood in the middle of the table. The second thing that I have found, I don't know if you have found this, is that those pieces of wood can deflect a lot. Like if you push on one, it'll bend down in the middle quite a bit. I think it's a fantastic value, and I think it's a great table, and it's got all those really cool features. And again, like you said, it stores the pieces. Really cool. But it does have some structural issues. So yeah, there's there's a bunch of design considerations to be made here. So I guess the question is, we have to ask Laughing Out Law, but would he be okay with this design, right? Where you would have, you'd put your TV. Well, let's presume that the TV was bigger than that. You'd have your TV in here in the middle. Okay, this is our TV. Unfortunately, TVs are flat, but they're not that flat, right? So, this is our virtual TV. Make our TV a nice hot purple color, right? And then over top of that, we would have a piece that would hopefully be pretty dang close to the height of the TV, so that it's basically laying flush. You would have a glass sheet or acrylic sheet, and that way, like as a player, when you're sitting here, the TV's right here. There's a little bit of a lip down, but you can still see the gaming board in the gaming area. But you could cover this with this piece of acrylic with a play mat, and then you'd have a kind of a gaming vault area. And then we would probably create a series of leaves that you would put over the table. That's way too thick, but and then that way the table, when it's not in gaming mode, would look like that. But then you could just pop that off, boom, you're back to your TV gaming mode. So now I'm gonna have to ask Laughing Out Law about the dimensions and about how many people he's thinking about playing, and does he like the idea of the quote unquote side DM position, right? So I think there's a lot of considerations that need to go into it and how the individual would like to use it. Space Narwhals, I completely agree with it. You haven't had the small gaps in the scenes. It's great if you can't afford wormwood. Well said. So it is a very high value table that you have. Making one yourself is very, it's very rewarding. It is a lot of work. So, what up, Ben? Just talking woodworking and table design and how to fit stuff in. I will say, since we're talking woodworking, I really want to push Aaron to see if we can do the hex table for his basement. The reason is, number one, the way that this hex table is built. I mean, each person has a crazy amount of space here. It's 30. Each person has frickin'. I think they have they have 30 inches of leg room, right? So they've got 32 inches or something of player space. But the other thing is, I have really loved the idea, if you're familiar with it, with Professor Dungeon Masters has this idea of the ultimate dungeon terrain. I don't know if you've seen it. It's the idea of just, because I and a lot of the games I've been looking at nowadays use vague zones anyways. And so I really like the idea of having a table that is designed to be based around, again, a Lazy Susan, but use it not for your standard grid, but to use it in a sort of UDT, Ultimate Dungeon Terrain setup. I'm assuming, does everybody know what Ultimate Dungeon Terrain is? Maybe you guys are not Professor DM aficionados. Wow, look at this. Someone's selling one on eBay for $50, which is wild to me. Let's see here. So this is Ultimate Dungeon Terrain, the way that Professor DM does it. And it's basically made of foam. And he actually carved in, this is somebody selling this on eBay, by the way. And again, the idea here is that you just, you just kind of set it up in a way that okay, we're going to say that, this is the room that the players are in. And then the outside area is, the warehouse where you guys are coming in from the outside. Right. It's a very basic idea. And, again, anybody in the middle is at, in close range. If you're base to base with somebody, you can attack them. But if you're within this central area, everybody's within, spear range or something like that. If you're out here, you can use a bow. And if you're on the edge, you're not in the battle. Maybe you're somewhere else. You're doing something else. It's just a very, very semi-abstract way of doing it. And I just think it's really cool and really clever. And then someone said, I don't know what a Lazy Susan is. So a Lazy Susan is basically a spinning. It's a spinning. That's a really big Lazy Susan. Here's someone building a Lazy Susan. And basically, it's just a round thing. It's used so that people can, you put food on it. It's very popular in dim sum restaurants if you've never seen it. And it just spins, usually pretty freely. And that way, if you're at a big restaurant, especially a dim sum, there might be a bunch of different dishes, the turkey's over there, the mashed potatoes are over there, the corn's over there. And then, you can just, instead of reaching over or asking for someone to pass it. You just spin the Lazy Susan until it gets close to you. So the idea is you take one of those Lazy Susans, but you put one of these things on top of it. Now the players that are sitting at the table can basically, everybody can reach it, because sure, I can't reach the other side of the Lazy Susan. I just spin it over to me onto my side. Now, Beowulf says, I can see someone spinning it too fast and miniatures flying everywhere. I completely agree with you, Beowulf, which is why I would want to create a Lazy Susan that had like indices, or little, like, you know, almost like a, not like a clicker, but like a tick, 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 right? Like, so that you can't just go and just spin it, right? It's more of just like a, it's something that you'd have to like, so it wouldn't like freely spin, because otherwise I could absolutely see somebody doing that. That's what the 600 volts like. Right. I can activate the Lazy Susan, and if someone touches it, it just shocks them. And that way it keeps their hands off of the Lazy Susan. Some games, Fantasy Flight games, Star Wars, do their combat in exactly this abstracted range ring kind of way. Yeah, a lot of games are doing that nowadays. These days, Legend of the Five Rings kind of does it that way. Forbidden Lands kind of does it that way. So there's a lot of games that are kind of kind of doing that. The thing I like about Professor Dungeon Master's UDT is you could use it that way, but you can also see maybe not this central area as much, but you could still have the grid in there. In fact, if you look at what he has here, my only thing that I would change to this is, let me whiteboard really quickly. Let me get rid of this. Where's the whiteboard? Whiteboard. There we go. So the only thing that I would change here is the way I would do it, because I agree with Ben. Ben says it would need 3 to 4 zones to cover most games. So the way that I would want to do this, how do you want to do this? The way that I would want to do this UDT is and I'm just spitballing here. I would want to have sort of a central area, okay? And then I would have the outer ring. Oh my God. I'm so bad at drawing circles. This is embarrassing. It's tough with a tablet, okay? And then what I would do is I would divide this outer ring into 4 zones. And then I would have that final thin outer band. And I might potentially divide that into 4 zones. And so that way, if you are in this zone, you could move into this zone, you can move into this zone, you can move into this zone, or you can move into this zone. And if you're in this zone, you could move here, 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 or you could move into the center. So that's how I would design it. And again, the size of these the idea is that these people are like at the outskirts or the fringes. So they don't need to be that big because, they're kind of away from the fray, and presumably most people aren't away from the fray. Strangely enough, like in temporal space, it feels like they can move much faster, but it's like, well, they're further away from the action. It's easier to move away when you're not in harm's range. And then you can have rules that basically say, like, if you're in a zone and you have, a short range weapon, then you can only attack people if you are in actual, base to base contact with them. So like, for example, I'm thinking about this from the point of view of Legend of the Five Rings. If my mini was here and your mini was right here, this is the range that we would need to be at if I had something like a wakizashi or something like that. Whereas I might say, yeah, okay, but you have a long bladed katana. You can attack anybody inside of this whole zone. And then this person right over here, they might have like a yari or a long spear. And I could say, you can attack anybody in an adjacent zone, but maybe you can't attack anybody in your zone, or maybe you can't attack someone who's in base-to-base contact with you. Because if they're in base-to-base contact with you, you can't use your Yari. You can attack them if they're in this space, but you can't attack them if they're, anyways. I don't know. I'm just thinking outside the box. And then like if you're based up, aka if you have somebody literally in base-to-base contact with your miniature, you are engaged. You can't leave this zone maybe without making some sort of check or suffering attacks of opportunity or all that stuff that we're used to doing. Whereas if your character is in the zone but isn't actually engaged, then you're free to move between zones. Right? And then a character could double move and blah, 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 blah. I don't know. It's just kind of the way that I thought about it heavily. I was kind of exposed to that terrain when I was playing a lot of Legend of the Five Rings. So I thought about it from the perspective of Legend of the Five Rings. Now Beowulf says, what if two people are in medium or long range? Can they fight each other in melee? What if they're on opposite sides of the center? Vague ranges just confuse me. Beowulf, you're absolutely right. There is no free lunch. You do lose some of that nuance if you have what I would call multiple centroids, right? Like if there's a fight going on over here, and there's another fight going on over here, and there's a third fight going on over here, and you consider these to be legally distinct and separate fights, this system here doesn't really work well for that kind of fight. It works better when you're like, you might have these two people are right here and these people are right here, but more or less you kind of consider them all within the same basic room or within the same basic area. If everybody could reach everybody within like a single move action, I think you're pretty good. And to be honest with you, that covers most D&D campaigns, most Pathfinder 2 campaigns, etc., etc., etc. Ben says, this is a very good design. Clearly, Derek has considered this at length. Yes, Ben, you are correct. Your observation is correct. I have considered this at length. Now, Beowulf says outer should be 8 zones, maybe. I'm not opposed to that idea, but I like kind of keeping it simple, Professor DM has mini pizzas for those separate spices. Oh, I've never seen that. Okay. That's great. Okay, cool. That's a really interesting idea. I mean, now we're getting really, really, really nerdy and esoteric, right? But like you could have, oh man, this is me being super nerdy here. Okay. Like you could have, all right, I'm just going to clear this whole thing. Hold on a second. Clear. Nope. That's not how I do that. How the hell do I clear here? Oh, whatever. I'll just make a new one. So you could have like, again, you could have your center, your outer ring, and oh my God, it's so bad. The problem, by the way, I'm not this bad at drawing circles. The problem is I'm drawing this on a Wacom tablet, right? Which means I'm drawing this looking at the screen, but my pen is over here. It can be kind of tricky. And I use my Wacom a lot, but not to draw shapes. I do it mostly to write. So anyways, you've got your ring over here, and this is like the big one, right? And then, like you said, you could have like a small one over here, which is just, maybe it's just the 5 zones. But like even in the design, like even into it, like you make it part of the textured terrain. Maybe there's like a Roman numeral 1 or something carved into this ring. And then you have like a token that you make that has a Roman numeral 1 on it. And then you can like put that Roman numeral 1 token in this zone. And that means that like what you're seeing happening here is what's actually happening here. And then like maybe you have, Roman numeral 2 is, maybe Roman numeral 2 is over here. And then you have a second mini pie plate. And again, it's got like the Roman numeral 2 engraved into it. And then you can put that like, token. This is if you're being really, really pedantic and you want to have this kind of, abstract system, but still have, I don't know, the ability to like break it down even further. Yeah, but I agree completely with Ikamos. It's all very interesting, but it sounds more complex, which is exactly the opposite, which is why you didn't go for zones. If you're getting to this point of needing this much complexity, what are we even doing here, right? But I do think it's fun. Like I think it's fun to think about, and I think it's interesting to think about. The other thing about it too is, and I can't stress this enough, is this gets rid of what I call the square pixel bitching, right? Like we abstract it and we say, it doesn't matter if you're 20 feet away or if you're 25 feet away, or if you're 35 feet away and you have to count 6 squares or 5 squares or 7 squares, we say, like if we were playing, D&D, like Pathfinder 1 or D&D 3rd edition, or I guess even Pathfinder 2, you would just say, look, if you can move to adjacent to anybody with a move action, you can move your guy from any zone to the adjacent zone for 1 move action. But when you enter that zone, you will not be engaged with anybody. So you have to put your mini off the side. If you want to go base to base with somebody, it is a second discrete move action. And so, that is like, that's very convenient, because now you're not worrying about, am I 30 feet away? Am I 25 feet away? Because another way to think of it is like a move action in Pathfinder 2 isn't a move action. It's not one action, right? If your speed is 30 feet, you are really kind of taking 6 move actions, aren't you? You're taking 6 1 square move actions with one of your primary actions. And that's why it just becomes getting really like, that it's like, it can become very pixel bitchy, especially if people are trying to, avoid attacks opportunity and do all this other stuff and all that other stuff. So, anyways, I don't know how we got off on this topic. Let's see here. I can see the use of it. The thing with Theater of the Mind combat is like, if you have the type of players who apparently really struggle with that, or they're going to always be asking you like, because like, if you're playing Theater of the Mind combat, you cannot be worried about whether something is 90 feet range or 100 feet range or 40 feet range. Like, you just have to like, just say, yeah, they're too far. And someone's like, well, how far would I have to move in order to engage them? You'd have to take a move action. Like, you just have to make it, everything has to become abstracted. And some people have a really hard time accepting that, especially when you're playing a game that might give actual ranges for things. Yeah. Now imagining a lightning bolt exiting 1 pie and cutting across 2 zones, skipping the close one, going into pie 1 and disappearing. Well, another thing, again, if we're talking like, let's just think like classic D&D. This also makes AoEs really, really easy. Like, you might have Fireball and you just make the AoE 1 zone. That's the range. You target, you go, okay, I am targeting this pie plate or this segment. Everybody in that zone gets hit with a Fireball. The orc reinforcements are coming in. Derek just put 7 orc minis, around the perimeter as the orcs come in, and you just go, okay, I am targeting, that zone, and I'm hitting all of them with a Fireball, right? Like, it just becomes super easy. I don't know about your players, but like when my players are playing a grid-based combat game like Pathfinder 2 or D&D 4th edition or D&D 3rd edition or Pathfinder 1, they will sit there with like a Fireball template and like try putting, we're lucky because we actually have a physical template that is the exact size of a Fireball, and it's like made of metal. It's a hollow in the middle, so it's like a frame, and like they will sit there and place it over and over and over. I'm sure you've seen people do this in Foundry VTT, right? Looking for that perfect place where they can put the template so that it hits 5 enemies, but also miraculously just misses all of their allies, Like, I'm sorry, but like, in this scenario, if you have, 7 orcs coming in, okay, and then in the middle, there's 1 PC, and your wizard is going to throw a Fireball into this zone. To me, there's no world where like your ally is not getting fireballed too, right? Anyways. So that was me talking about the things. So I think again, the purpose of this stream was just because I was home and I've been thinking about this table, and I had some time to kind of go over how my thought process has evolved and kind of where I am thinking about the table design now. And again, the long and the short of it is I want to use the same kind of table design that I did originally for Bob's table so long ago. Beautiful table, all walnut. But the problem is these arm rails, these hand rails that go around the edge of the table are just too thin for tabletop role-playing games. And this massive vaulted space, just quite frankly, isn't needed. Your RPG game does not need a TV this big. You don't need this much room for your battle mats. What you need room for is your DM screen, your character sheets, your dice, your rule books, and rules references. So that is why basically the idea is take this design and just move those arm rails in so that it becomes less of a thin frame and essentially a really, really thick frame. This will give players plenty of space to be able to put down a rule book, a character sheet, some dice, maybe a soda, and not have to worry about, where do you put a soda and that other thing, right? We had to design specific things. And then at the same time, you do have a centrally recessed area where you can put a TV, and you can hook it up and hopefully, and set up a scenario where with a piece of glass on top of it, the players will be able to move their miniatures and do all this other stuff and still have enough room for their other thing, and you get all the benefits of it. Or you can cover that piece of recessed glass with a neoprene style mat, like a mouse mat material, like a mouse pad material. And then you can use that, and you can put your Chessex battle mats, you could put your board game pieces, you could put whatever you want into that. Now, you don't have as much room as you did with the original design, but that is the price that you pay for having this extra space to play. So and I think it is, for a tabletop role-playing game perspective, I think that this is probably the better option. And then of course, like I said, we will create a topper that will go over the top of this and, sit on top of it. And that way, when you're done playing, if you want to convert this into a perfectly beautiful piece of hardwood furniture, you just put the topper on, and you'll have, 2 or 3 very thin, very manageable, very easy to control seams that will run across, but it won't look out of place because we're used to seeing that on tables that have leaves. And there you go. It does it gives the tabletop kind of a thicker appearance too, that can look kind of nice. So it can kind of give it a nice visual look. I actually think I have a photo. Let me see if I can find it. With Bob's. Let me see if I can find it here. Maybe not. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. Okay. So like you can see here, in this is Bob's table, the topper has kind of like a nice chamfer to the edge of it. And so the topper is sitting on top of that rail, right? And you can, it creates a nice visual reference and visual line. It's interesting. So very cool. Let's see. What wood is this prize table going to be made from? Well, Space Narwhals, luckily, I live in Ohio. We have an abundance of local hardwood dealers here. A lot of Amish hardwood dealers who make some really good product. Now, it's all, rough cut, rough sawn lumber. So you got to mill it up yourself at home. But I can pretty much get any domestic species. So domestic American in where I live in the Midwest means I can get oak, hickory, maple, walnut, cherry, right? All the great North American hardwoods. Exotics are a little bit harder for me to come by. So I told him any hardwood species from America, and he and his wife chose maple. So we're going to be making this from a hard maple. So it'll be really durable. It'll be more of a pale light color, of course. But they wanted that extra durability, and they wanted the lighter color. So I think that is what they are going to be making it from. So close. It's basically ironwood. It's going to be rough on my tools. I'll say that. Maple is rough on your tools. It's really tough. It's really heavy. How are you planning to secure the topper? Magnets? Just curious. Yes. So on Bob's table, I use magnets. We have these magnets, the neodymium magnets. They make ones that have they have a hole in the middle of the magnet for a screw head. So you actually drill out the hole for the magnet. You set the magnet into the hole. You then drill the magnet to hold it in place. You don't want to just glue it, because the glue can give out. And then when you put the topper on, everything snaps together. I don't know if I have a really great picture of that. So I don't know that I can share that, but it does use magnets. That is correct. So yeah. I bet that's hella satisfying to put on. It is. It is. It almost feels like magic, you know, because it's just like, you know, and it just kind of clicks all together. It's very cool. Very cool. And it's actually it's actually surprising. It's one of those things that's actually not that hard to do. The magnets can be a little bit expensive, but like when you're paying, you know, $800, $900 for wood, you know, when you're paying, you know, $10 or $15 for a small bag of magnets, the scale really doesn't do its justice. And again, it's not load bearing, you know, like if someone wanted to really physically try to brute force and push the table topper off, the magnets aren't going to hold that. It's just designed that for casual, you know, no one's going to bump it off. Plus the weight of the topper itself, combined with the frictional interface with the surface area, tends to pretty much just kind of keep it in place anyways. So yeah, so that's where we're at. So the goal is that once I get this design finalized, Bob and I need to make a trip out to Amish country. We got to buy some maple. We got to buy some hardwood. We got to mill it up in my garage, and then we got to start making it. And then once it's made, we got to ship it. Now, one thing that I did not talk about is that this table needs to go across the country. Either we're going to be carrying it across the country, or you know, some freight company is going to be taking it across the country. So this table is going to have to be made in a modular fashion. It's going to be insanely heavy. So heavy. Maple is such a dense wood. I would say it's not going to weigh twice as much as Bob's, but it's going to weigh a lot. Maple's really heavy. So this is a demo. So this is a system that Festool created that I used in this table. Now, this was a gaming table that I built for a customer who lived in DC. And this is we call this knockdown furniture. Knockdown furniture means it is capable of being taken apart. So in this case, what we're looking at right here in the video is the leg of the table. And you can see that the leg has two mortises. Those are holes. And then it also has this kind of weird, funky metal piece that is sticking out of it. So never mind the camera shake. So what happens is the rail, the apron, the part that connects the two legs together, it has two wooden dowels which will slot into those matching holes. And then it has this access port for the metal conjoining piece. Now, if you look at this metal piece in the middle here, you'll see that it has a hole in it, but it is slightly dished in the middle. It's kind of like a funnel or a cone. That will insert into the other piece of wood, and it'll be snug, but it won't be connected, right? The thing that normally would be connecting these would be the fact that these things would all be glued together. So we need to provide some sort of mechanical leverage. Now, what you don't see is inside of that hole, there is one of these metal pieces. It's a receiver. So the metal tab goes into that central area, and then there's this little grub screw on the top of it. And what ends up happening is, so that is inside that little hole. And then once that metal piece goes in there with the little funnel, this screw is going to screw into that funnel, and it's actually going to pull. It's basically, it's ever so slightly misaligned. So as you put the screw in, it actually will pull in the leg tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. So you can see it there as the table kind of, goes from being loose, and then you can see it starts to completely cinch up and become completely flush, right? And at that point, basically the table is joined. Now, this is not the strongest joint in the world. Of course it can't be. It's made to be taken apart. But the thing you have to realize is that joint, that table leg joint, is mostly going to be pressured downward, right? That connector is just preventing this from getting pulled out. So the only time that this is really a problem, and I would this is something I tell everybody who has knockdown furniture. It doesn't have to be furniture I made, okay? If you have furniture that you screwed the legs into, never, ever pull your table, okay? Because that is where your table is at the weakest, okay? Your table is the weakest when you're grabbing one end of the table and you're pulling the other two legs across the table, because what you're trying to do is pull that connection apart from where the rails of the table or the apron of the table connects with the leg. And that's usually where your screws are or whatever. And that's your weakest link by far. When the weight is pushing down on the table, that is going straight through horizontally through those wooden dowels. That is very, very strong. It will never budge. The only time that a table like this has any sort of structural weakness is when you're trying to pull it. And how often do you ever pull a table apart? Well, you might say never, unless you are picking up one end of it and dragging the other end of it. That is a big, big no-no. So I would say that most people probably have tables that, have legs that come out. Lift it up on both ends. Like you'll really save yourself a lot of trouble over the years by not doing that. Every time you do that, you are substantially weakening the table in a measurable amount. Now, the table I built for Bob, he could do that because his table is literally permanently physically fastened together. You could pull the wood apart, but at that point, what are we talking about? You're literally ripping the wood apart. That's on a whole different problem. But the fastener is not going to go anywhere because Bob's table is permanently attached. But that means it is the size that it is. We had to move it as one whole piece, and so it is, that is the problem. No, there was no Friday night game. Aaron's wife and I think his kids are sick, and his wife's been kind of they're not sure, just for safety's sake, if it's COVID or not yet. They don't know. So she's been kind of quarantining in the basement, which is where we play. So no Friday game. So that's why I said, hey, you know what? Screw it. I'm home. And I was going to go play Magic, but it was snowing and it's cold and it's windy and I didn't want to go out. So here I am talking about tables. So, but yeah, let me know what you want out of a gaming table. If you're a patron, let me know what you would like to see in a gaming table on the Discord, or maybe just leave a comment below if you're not a member of our Patreon. If there are woodworkers out there that happen to find this, I'd love to know your thoughts, on the process. I've built 5 or 6 of these traditional gaming tables, and I've probably built about another 5 or 6 big dining room tables, a number of smaller pieces of furniture, nightstands, like sofa tables. But in terms of big tables, I've built about 10 of those, and half of them have been gaming tables. So I've gotten a good grip on it, but this is the first time designing a table and building a table in this fashion. So that is why I think it's going to be an interesting process. You learn something new every time, and I think it'll be really cool. And obviously, we are going to be filming that, or at least live streaming it, or doing something. We're going to do something. I don't know if we're going to literally film every single part of it. But yeah. By traditional gaming table, you mean removable top, sunken vault. Yeah. Sorry. I know you just got here, GM Scott. But by traditional gaming table, I mean the table that is this, right? The big board gaming vault, and then it's got the topper over top of it. What I was describing is I have found that this is not ideal for TTRPGs. And so my proposed design is something more like this, where you basically will still have a removable top, but when you take the top off, instead of having a big vault with relatively narrow rails, you'll instead have a smaller vault, but much wider rails, essentially to the point where it's more of like a thick frame that is long enough and wide enough that you can put laptops, tablets, books, dice, character sheets, pencils, erasers. And that way everybody has enough room. And then this central recessed area can be sized to fit a certain standard size television, likely a 43-inch, roughly 43-inch TV. I think is a good compromise between size and reachability, accessibility. If you make the TV too big, number one, you'll never use it all that real estate on your battle grid, but also a bigger TV means it's harder for other people to reach, the different corners of your. Yeah, you have this massive TV, but nobody can reach it, so it's kind of pointless. So I think there's got to be a compromise between size and how accessible the TV is, and how much getting up and moving around you and your players want to do. So this is kind of the design I'm thinking of for Laughing Out Loud, roughly. And in terms of what you would normally think of as like the dining room table in your home, I will say that this is probably about as long, and we'll probably actually extend this to 72 inches, just because that'll be a perfect 6 feet. But where gaming tables like this tend to be very different in their dimension is in their width. This is much, not tremendously so, but it is wider than a traditional dining room table. A lot of, dining room tables are they're typically like 36 inches, 38 inches wide, right? About 3 feet, maybe a little bit more. And it's basically designed so that, you can pass something to the person opposite to you. This table is wider than that. So, in some ways it's like great for Thanksgiving dinner because you have this massive area. You can put all of like your fixins and turkeys and all that other stuff. But, yeah. I've also seen RPG design that didn't use a sunken vault in the center, but rather a raised platform, smaller like your design, with rooms for books around the outside. Yeah, that's a pretty cool idea too. Yeah, I think that's kind of neat. The advantage here, GM Scott, is that if you can imagine, let's say we put a TV into this vault here. Let's pretend that this is a nice little TV. Okay. That's our TV. And we might have a piece of acrylic or like a bezel that goes over this. But what ends up happening is we have those 3 table topper leaves. We can just literally throw that topper onto the table and boom, there's no sign of anything. You don't have to you can leave your TV set up. You can leave your other stuff. Everything is set up perfectly fine. And then all you have to do is take off the topper and boom, you're back to gaming. So it's kind of like a transformer in that respect. So I'm trying to keep it so that you can quickly, you don't have to do too much fiddling or fussing around. Right. Right. Ted, absolutely. I mean, the dimensions, I talked about this before, the table that I really want to build for Aaron's basement is this hex table. But this hex table at its widest point is 6 feet. So this table is 6 feet roughly by 6 feet. So that's really wide. You can't fit that in a standard dining room. Standing dining rooms tend to be rectangular because they're made for rectangular tables. In our case, Aaron's basement has pretty much been completely purposed over for playing gaming. We can literally put a big 6-foot table basically right into the middle of his basement, and it doesn't matter. So there is definitely a consideration in that respect. Yeah. We could also do stuff in the vault anyways, GM Scott, because we're going to be running power to this thing regardless. Actually, we were talking, GM Scott, another consideration is that because there's going to be a TV here, what I'm probably going to end up doing is, cutting or some, routing some holes into the bottom of this. They wouldn't be this big, to allow airflow. And I was even talking about maybe potentially getting some low speed, pretty quiet fans maybe to help circulate air, just because I really do not want the heat. Not only would the heat be bad for the electronics, but the heat could be pretty bad for the wood too. So I don't want to cause any problems there. But yeah. Well, that's enough about woodworking. How's everybody doing? Hopefully well. I think we were going to vote tonight to see what we were going to play, but I don't know what it is. I think we're going to end up playing 4th edition. If our buddy Tim, who you know from the channel, is going to be coming back, and he told me, he's like, yeah, I'm just really looking to play a tactical role-playing game. And I was like, damn it. Not that I'm mad about playing 4th edition. It's just, I've played a lot of tactical role-playing games, do something different. Space Narwhals, got to hop off, but this has been super fun. As a gamer and a woodworker, this hit a perfect nerd combo. Can't wait to see videos of your build. Yeah, Space Narwhals. The plan is, thank you for the super chat, by the way. It's awesome. This was literally totally just us hanging out, being a bonus stream. I'm not going to literally do every single day that we build this thing, but I want to create a highlight video or two that shows sort of our general build process. And then the plan is that when we deliver this thing, right, that we are going to road trip, me, Bob, and Aaron, across the country to deliver this table in person. And now how we get the table there, that still remains to be seen. Do we rent a van? Do we freight ship the thing in a crate and then whatever? But the point is, we want to be able to actually deliver it physically to Laughing Out Law, white glove service, assemble the table for him, show him all how it works, and then hopefully we can stream this whole process. We can do a bunch of videos, share with you all on the road, just, maybe meet up with some fans and patrons along the way. And then when we get to Laughing Out Law's table, hopefully we can play a game with him and on the new table, and then boom, head back home, fly back home. So that'd be really cool. But thank you. I'm glad that you. We are a rare breed, right? The woodworker gamer. I don't know how many of us there are out there. Ben says first edition was a massacre. Greedy player, ooh, love it. Wanted to sneak back into a barrow to grab something from a sealed room. 2 coffer corpses and a ring of genie summoning put a quick end to that endeavor. You got to love it. Again, I think, people overstate the capriciousness of death in early editions of D&D. And I agree. If you're walking down the corridor and there's nothing to be said, nothing to be done, and suddenly you're just like, oh, rocks fall, you die. That is very unbecoming. But when a player can clearly trace their actions, and say, I got greedy, I overreached, I overstretched, and that ended up in their character's demise, when they decided to push their luck and it didn't work out, I think that's a very satisfying gameplay. So I definitely agree with that. We just need to get a van and paint it to be like the A-Team. Yeah, that's just what we need. Me and Bob and Smith in an unmarked van, driving across the country. Space Narwhals is also a lady gamer and a woodworker, which is a double rarity for sure. But I've said this before. I got into woodworking. I only started doing it like 4 years ago. I got into it because I wasn't working at the time and my business was struggling, and I needed to do something around the house to keep my mind sane. And I'd always been a little bit fascinated with it. And what I discovered is I work, I work on YouTube. I work in analytics. I work in computers. I needed something physical, and I needed, this something had kind of grown in me. Even photography, which I did, is kind of, unless it gets printed, but most of the people that were buying my photography was doing it for headshots on LinkedIn and dating profiles. So still digital. But what I discovered is that, all the work I had done for so many years for companies that I worked for, it was all digital. There was no proof that it had ever happened. It was just ones and zeros, and probably honestly didn't even do anything anymore. So I got really obsessed with this idea of being able to build things that last, which is why I got into the kind of furniture making and woodworking that I did, which is, very, heirloom quality, mortise and tenon style joinery. And I'm still very much a student, and I'm still learning. Like, I'd love to learn how to like hand cut dovetails, and I know how to do it in theory, but I've not really done it. Just to really get into the true origins of it. But I've built tables for people that are going to be in their homes for generations, and like that makes me feel really awesome. That is a level of satisfaction that I have never gotten with any other hobby or any other job. That is really, really cool. So I'm a big fan of woodworking. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for stopping by tonight and hanging out with me for a little bit while we talk about woodworking. And if you have any questions or comments, let me know below. This is going to be ongoing, and we're going to hang out, and we'll see what happens. Looking forward to the trip. So, thanks for hanging out on this unexpected chill Friday night stream, and thank you to a couple people who decided to throw in a couple bucks, but that was very nice. I didn't even have a tip goal tonight because I was like, hey, it's just us hanging out. Everybody, well, take care. Good night, and I'll see you next time on Nights of Last Call. Good night, everybody.